What's up, sports fans? This is the NCAA College Sports Channel. It is time to give you my upset alert games heading into Week 8 of the 2025 college football season. Going back to my upset alert games from last week in Week 7, we had only one game out of the 8 games that I picked from. Only one of them turned out to be an upset, and that was Indiana going on the road and beating Oregon. So that was the only upset that occurred from last week. So yeah, it was definitely a quiet week in Week 7 for the upset alert video. Probably the quietest weekend that we've had throughout this series. I think, the recent, weeks that we've had, I feel like, 4 or 5 has been like the most that we've had. And then probably, at best, an average, it's probably 2 or 3. So yeah, one upset from this past weekend. How about Week 8, though, as we head into the second half of the season? Are we in store for more upsets this weekend? Or are we kind of in store for like maybe a quiet weekend again? Let's find out. But let's get into these upset alert games here for Week 8. We're going from the least likely and working our way to the most likely upset, in my opinion. Starting here with a Friday night game in the ACC. It's Louisville at Miami. This one is at 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. Miami favored by 13.5 points in this one. You got to wonder if Miami is kind of due for a loss here at some point, since it is the second half of the season. Yeah, they are undefeated. This is a pretty talented Miami football team. They're a pretty good team as well, and they probably are the front runners in the ACC. But this is a Friday night game. Miami is playing at home, which is good news, but we know how these Friday night games play out. That we see those upsets happen a lot to the top 10 teams in the country, and we've kind of seen that already with Florida State going down to Virginia. Could that be the case here for Miami? I'll be honest here. I haven't watched a ton of Louisville football this year. I will be able to watch them on Friday night finally, but I look at this Louisville team. I feel like, they're not really a talented team. They're a pretty solid football team, but they're coming off a loss to Virginia in overtime last week. You got to wonder if they'll be focused a little bit. And they played a pretty easy schedule this year so far, so they haven't played a very talented team like Miami. So, yeah, this will be a tough one here for Louisville. Not saying that an upset will happen here, but it could be pretty likely. I mean, it's the least likely upset of them all in this video, but it's a Friday night game. You never know what could happen. So keep an eye on this one if you are a Miami fan. Again, Miami favored by 13.5. This one is on Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Next up, another Friday night game in the Big Ten. This one's at 8 o'clock Eastern time. It's Nebraska on the road at Minnesota. Nebraska favored by 9.5, and this one will be on Fox. I look at this Nebraska team, pretty good football team, but Minnesota is a pretty solid football team. They're kind of a sneaky good team in the Big Ten. Not a very talented team, but they're really well coached by P.J. Fleck. He's been there since 2017. He's a really good coach, and when it comes to like these games against high-powered offenses, Minnesota's going to want to run the football, and sometimes their defense does show up in those games. So I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota did pull off the upset here. I think Nebraska's definitely got the talent advantage, but you never know. Nebraska could go on the road here and, probably struggle. And, Minnesota could probably win by more than 10 points. But I do expect this game to come down to the wire, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Minnesota did pull off the upset here. Even though Nebraska is favored by 9.5, I look at that spread there. That's pretty high in my opinion. But either way, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's 50-50. I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska did survive, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota did pull off the upset here. Again, this is a Friday night game just like the Louisville and Miami game. An upset is definitely likely possible here in this one. Then we go to the Saturday games. We got Texas Tech at Arizona State. This one's at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Fox as well. Texas Tech is also favored by 9.5. I mean, these are pretty high numbers heading into this weekend's games. You got some spreads that are at 9.5 or even lower than that. But most of these games are either in the 5 through 9 range. You look at Texas Tech though, they come in undefeated. They are on a hot streak right now. This has been one of the best teams in the Big 12 all season long, and they're sitting there at number 7 in the AP poll, and also as a top 10 team. I feel like Texas Tech is living up to what I thought they would do. This is a very underrated team, and you never know. This could be a playoff contender as well, but they're heading on the road here to Arizona State, an Arizona State team that's coming off of beating last week against Utah. They got blown out in that game. Now, they didn't have Sam Levin in that game. You got to wonder if he'll be available in this game. I'm not sure what the injury status of him is looking like. I mean, I haven't really watched Arizona State in a while. I mean, I wasn't able to watch their game against Utah because it was so late of a game. But still, this is a home game for Arizona State. You kind of feel like they'll be fired up for this game because it's against a top 10 team in Texas Tech. But Texas Tech is a really good football team. So I don't know if I see an upset here happening, but it's the Big 12. There's a ton of parity, and, this is going to be a good game in my opinion. So, yeah, Texas Tech, although they've been pretty good this year, an upset definitely could play out in this one. So watch out for this one if you are a Texas Tech fan. Next up, USC at Notre Dame. Rivalry game here at 7:30 Eastern Time on NBC. Notre Dame favored by 9.5. That is a very high number there for a USC team that's coming off a big win against Michigan last weekend. Over and under is sitting at 61.5. So we're expecting a lot of points to be scored in this game. You look at Notre Dame, I haven't really watched them ever since, the Texas A&M game back in week number 3. I know they're coming off at a 4-game winning streak, and they also came off a win against Boise State. Now, to be fair, I actually watched them a little bit against Arkansas, but they did blow them out in that game. So, yeah, Notre Dame has kind of had, a big winning streak ever since losing their first 2 games of the year. But you look at USC, this is a pretty good football team. I think people kind of forget Lincoln Riley a little bit, how good of a coach he is. You go back to his Oklahoma days, his offense has always been good. But now you look at his defense. I feel like his defense is now kind of taking a big step forward. Yeah, they gave up a lot of points in the loss to Illinois, but still, this is a pretty good USC team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did pull off the upset here, especially on the road. And this is also kind of a very important game for Notre Dame coming up because if they lose this game, they probably are going to be out of the college football playoff conversation. But if they win out the rest of the year, then I think Notre Dame does make the playoff. But if they lose, I think it's going to be a game where they are eliminated from the playoff conversation. So yeah, USC is capable of pulling off an upset. It's a rivalry game. Anything can go here in this one. But the advantage for Notre Dame is that they're playing at home. So the crowd will be fired up for this one. Next up, we got Tennessee at Alabama the 3rd Saturday of October. This one is also at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC, though. Alabama is favored by 8.5. Both teams are not really similar, but they're coming off both similar stories from this past weekend. Both of them coming off 3-point wins. I feel like Tennessee kind of overlooked Arkansas this past weekend, and we're looking ahead to this game against Alabama. Alabama played a pretty good football team in Missouri. They won that game by 3 as well. And I look at this Alabama team. Their defense has come a long way ever since that loss to Florida State. And I look back at that game. I feel like Alabama definitely should have won that game. It was probably a bit of a fluke now since Florida State has now lost 3 in a row. And Alabama's played pretty good football here down the stretch. Ty Simpson has gotten better as a quarterback. But you look at Tennessee, Joey Aguilar, I've been really impressed with him. The transfer coming in from UCLA. I mean, he's played pretty well for Tennessee. He's had his good and bad, but, he's done a pretty nice job in my opinion. So this is a game that potentially could go either way. I mean, it's a game that could be a shootout. It could be a low-scoring game, depending on how both defenses do. Now, to be fair, both defenses are actually pretty good, but the offenses, they've been pretty good as of late, so we'll see how, good these defenses play, and then we'll see who the better defense can come up with a big stop if it ends up being a shootout. But if it turns out to be a low-scoring game, a couple plays could decide this game. And, throughout this series, it kind of is feeling like the home team is winning this series ever since the last 3 years. Tennessee won it in 2022 in Knoxville. Alabama won it a couple years ago in Tuscaloosa. And then Tennessee won it again in Knoxville. So maybe Alabama wins this game. It's a revenge game for them, but I don't really know who I'm going to pick in this game just yet. You'll have to wait and see tomorrow. But this one is at 7:30 Eastern Time on ABC. Next up, we have another SEC game, Ole Miss at Georgia. This one is at 3:30 Eastern Time, also on ABC. And I heard that College Game Day is going to go down to this game this weekend. You got Georgia that's favored by 7 in this one. You got an Ole Miss team that, definitely has a lot of question marks. Is this Ole Miss team, really good this year, or are they a little bit overrated? Well, the last time I watched Ole Miss was when they played against LSU, and I've been really impressed with their defense. Their defense has kind of, been a little bit better than I didn't really think they would be. Their offense, of course, is good every year, but they've had, some back and forth, exchanges with the quarterback and everything. It started out with Austin Simmons, and they go with the backup quarterback. Now, to be fair, Ole Miss did not look good last week against Washington State. You got to wonder if they were looking ahead to this game. And then you look at Georgia on the other side. I wouldn't say they look great against Auburn. They get off to a slow start, and then they have a better second half, and they struggled on third downs big time. So you got to wonder if Georgia was kind of overlooking Auburn as well. But that's a rivalry game, so Georgia shouldn't be able to overlook it. But this is a game where Georgia's going to be out for revenge. They lost to this Ole Miss team last year pretty big, and I do expect a fight here from Georgia in this game. But maybe it's one of those games where Georgia kind of gets off to a slow start, and then they start to play a little bit of better football in the second half. It could be one of those games. That's what Georgia's kind of been like this year. Slow starts in the first half, and then they start to look like the Georgia team that is pretty dominant, and they make adjustments like they always do, and then they pull away in the second half. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss did pull off the upset here, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia did, win this game by at least double digits. They're going to come out really angry after last year's loss. Then we got Oklahoma at South Carolina, another SEC game. This one is at 12:45 Eastern Time on the SEC Network. Oklahoma is favored by 5.5. You got to wonder if a letdown's going to happen here for the Sooners after last weekend's emotional loss to Texas. The second half for them did not go so well for them. John Mateer really struggled in that game, and I still look back at that game at why the Oklahoma coaching staff would play him through an injury. I just don't get it. I don't think he was fully healthy in that game, and that's probably why you saw the accuracy was a little bit off of John Mateer. It was not the same John Mateer that we saw in those big games against Auburn and then also Michigan. So you got to wonder if he's fully healthy going into this game. South Carolina's not a bad team. They haven't been pretty good this year, but South Carolina's got an electrifying athlete in the North Sellers that can run the football. If Oklahoma cannot contain him on the defensive side of the football, then South Carolina might win this game big. But if they contain him, I feel like Oklahoma is going to win this one in a little bit of a closer game. But you got to wonder if Oklahoma's over that loss to Texas. I mean, are they over it, or are they, definitely not over it too soon, or are they just going to, play really good football here down the stretch? That's obviously the big question mark. But I wouldn't be surprised if South Carolina did pull off the upset here. I mean, it's at South Carolina. It's a very tough place to play, and I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma definitely lost back-to-back games as well. And then finally, probably the most likely upset of them all, it's a rivalry game, Utah at BYU. This one is at 8 o'clock Eastern Time on Fox. Utah favored by 3.5 here. This is a pretty even matchup in my opinion. You look at both of these teams, rivalry obviously. These are, two really good football teams. Now, BYU really hasn't played anybody, I don't think, that tough this year. I mean, BYU is a team that definitely has a lot of question marks. A lot of people definitely overlooking BYU. I'm kind of the same way, but I don't really know how good this team really is until they play like a really good defensive team. Now, the last time we saw them, they beat Arizona in a pretty close game in double overtime. Maybe they were kind of overlooking that team and probably looking ahead to this game of the rivalry game. And then you got Utah coming off a blowout win against Arizona State. Again, Arizona State didn't have Sam Levin in that game. So you got to wonder if Utah will be ready for this, road environment. It's not a very tough place to play, but it's a rivalry. And I think BYU definitely capable of pulling off an upset. If BYU wins this game, I feel like they'll definitely be a contender in the Big 12 and then possibly a playoff contender. I don't want to go too far there with BYU, but you look at Utah, if they win this game, then it turns out BYU maybe was overrated. But what if BYU gets blown out? Then that'll tell us that BYU definitely was overrated, in my opinion. So that's probably the most likely upset to happen here this weekend, in my opinion. And those are all my upset alert games heading into Week 8 of the 2025 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about my upset alert games down in the comments below, and which upset do you think happens, and also which team do you think pulls off the massive upset this weekend out of these 8 games? Let me know down in the comments below as well. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my NCAA College Sports YouTube channel.